I never expected a phone call to change everything. You think you deserve that money, my stepmother, Mary, sneered over the phone. That trust fund belongs to Patricia now. She's better than you'll ever be. Her words hit me like sharp knives. I gripped the edge of the hotel desk, trying to steady my breathing. My heart pounded, but I refused to let her hear the panic in my voice. Mary sounded proud, almost happy, as she told me the news. She had taken the money my mother had left for me. My name is Madison Bailey, and I am 29 years old. I thought I had finally escaped my family's toxic drama. I work in pharmaceutical sales, traveling across the country most weeks. Today should have been just another Saturday in New York, preparing for a client meeting. Instead, I was listening to Mary brag about stealing my inheritance. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, keeping my voice calm. I knew Mary wanted a reaction, tears, anger, maybe even begging. But I gave her nothing. I could almost picture her face twisting in frustration. "That's all you have to say?" she demanded. "Patricia needs that money for her wedding and new house. And you're just going to waste it on your meaningless sales job." I thought about my mother. She had worked hard to build a business from nothing. Before she passed away when I was 17, she set up a trust fund for me so I could follow my dreams. But Mary had been after that money ever since she married my dad, just 3 years after my mom's death. I took a deep breath. "Is there anything else?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Mary went quiet. That silence told me everything. She had expected this to be easy, but she had no idea what I had done 7 months ago. Back then, I met with Mr. Ryan, my mother's old lawyer. He had warned me that Mary was asking a lot of questions about my trust fund. That raised a red flag. Together, we made sure there were legal protections in place. Any unauthorized attempts to take the money would not only be blocked but could lead to serious legal trouble. Mary had no clue. "You've always been such a disappointment," she spat, trying one last time to make me break. I almost laughed. A disappointment? Because I refused to let her steal from me? Because I didn't beg her for approval like my stepsister Patricia always did? I had spent years trying to escape Mary's cruelty. Now I finally saw her for what she was: bitter, greedy, and desperate. "Goodbye, Mary," I said, hanging up. I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone. The storm inside me started to calm. Mary thought she had won, but she had no idea what was coming. "Your stepsister deserves this more than you ever did." Mary's words rang in my ears as I ended the call. I turned to look out my hotel window at the New York skyline, my hands trembling, but not from fear. Everything was documented. Every call, every attempt, every lie. Mary had finally pushed too far, and I was ready. Living with her had been like walking on eggshells ever since my mom died from cancer when I was 17. My dad, lost in his grief, had remarried just 3 years later. That's when Mary and her daughter, Patricia, moved in. Patricia was 13 at the time, and from the very beginning, the tension was unbearable. My mom had worked hard to build her pharmaceutical consulting business from the ground up. She wanted to make sure I had a secure future. The trust fund she left me wasn't just money. It was a piece of her, a way of protecting me even after she was gone. But Mary didn't see it that way. To her, the trust fund was unfair. In her mind, I had an advantage that Patricia didn't, and she made it clear she wasn't going to accept that. "Your mom wouldn't want you to be so selfish," she would say, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We're all family now. You should share." But we weren't family. Not really. Not in the ways that mattered. While my dad drowned himself in work to avoid his pain, Mary took control. She slowly pushed me to the side, making Patricia the center of everything. Every little thing Patricia did was celebrated: good grades, dance recitals, even just finishing a school project. Meanwhile, my hard work was ignored. When I earned scholarships and got accepted into a top business school, there was barely a mention of it at home. Mary made sure my dad only saw what she wanted him to see. The moment I truly understood how deep her manipulation went was on my college graduation day. I had worked tirelessly, graduated at the top of my class, and already secured a great job. It was supposed to be one of the proudest days of my life. But my dad wasn't there. "Patricia has a cold. She needs her father right now," Mary had told him. That was when I knew nothing would change unless I made a change. So, the very next day, I packed my things and left. I focused on building my own life, my own success. I worked hard in pharmaceutical sales, traveling across the country, making something of myself without relying on anyone. And the trust fund? I left it untouched. Not because I didn't need it, but because I knew accessing it would mean another fight with Mary. She would never stop trying to control me. But now, standing in my hotel room, I knew the fight was finally over. Mary had made her final move, and she had no idea what was coming next. Every time I visited home, Mary would make rude comments about how lucky I was. She always talked about how Patricia had to struggle without the same advantages I had. 7 months ago, Mr. Ryan, my mom's old lawyer, called me with a warning. He told me Mary had been asking a lot of questions about my trust fund. That's when everything made sense. She had been waiting for the perfect moment to take what wasn't hers. But I wasn't that scared, helpless 17-year-old girl anymore. I was my mother's daughter, and she had taught me well. I knew how to protect what was mine. The trust fund wasn't just money. It was my mother's hard work, her legacy, her way of making sure I had a future. That evening, sitting in my hotel room, I pulled out a small photo of my mom, the one I always carried with me. She was smiling, full of confidence, the kind of woman I had always wanted to become. This trust fund was meant to be my safety net, my chance to take risks and build something of my own, just like she did. I took a deep breath and dialed Mr. Ryan's number. My hands were steady, even though anger still burned inside me. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm and familiar. Mary finally made her move, I said, getting straight to the point. She says she transferred everything to Patricia. I was expecting this, he replied. I got an alert this morning that someone tried to access the account. Don't worry, Madison. The extra security we put in place worked exactly as planned. Every attempt was blocked and recorded. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. So, nothing was actually transferred? Not a single penny, he confirmed. But we have everything we need to prove attempted fraud. The evidence is solid. He paused before asking, would you like me to move forward with the next steps? I thought about everything Mary had done. The manipulation, the cruel comments, how she had slowly turned my father against me. She had always been so sure she could control the situation. She never even considered that I might be 2 steps ahead of her. I had waited long enough. Yes, I said firmly. It's time to end this. Send the evidence to the family lawyer and make sure my dad sees everything. I want him to see exactly what his wife tried to do. Consider it done, Mr. Ryan said. Then he added, Madison, your mother would be proud. She always said you were smarter than people gave you credit for. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and booked an earlier flight home. My client meeting could wait. I had a family issue to deal with, and this time, I was the one in control. I landed in Los Angeles the next morning. The autumn air was cold and sharp. My dad's house, the house I grew up in, looked the same, but something felt different. Maybe that something was me. I had called my dad to let him know I was coming, but I didn't mention Mary's phone call. Some things needed to be said face to face. When I walked into the living room, they were all there, Dad, Mary, and Patricia. Mary's confident smile faded the moment she saw me. Confusion flashed across her face. She had expected me to be angry or upset. Instead, I was calm. Madison, my dad said, looking surprised. I thought you were coming later. Is everything okay? Actually, Dad, we need to talk. I took out my phone and the file Mr. Ryan had sent me. Mary called me yesterday. She told me she took all the money from my trust fund and gave it to Patricia. I thought you should see exactly what happened. Mary's face turned pale. I was just trying to help Patricia, she started, her voice shaking. Don't, I said firmly. My voice was steady, cold. Every time you tried to access my account, it was recorded. Every phone call, every forged signature, every lie, it's all in here. I handed my dad the file. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. With each one, his expression grew darker. Mary, what did you do? He whispered. She's lying. Patricia blurted out, her face red with anger. She's always been jealous of me. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I pulled out another document, the full trust fund statement. The money is still there, I said. Safe and untouched. Mary tried to steal it, but she failed. I knew about her plans months ago, and I made sure she wouldn't succeed. Mary's eyes widened in shock. You set me up, she spat. No, I replied calmly. I protected what was mine, just like my mother taught me. The room went silent. My dad kept reading, his eyes moving over every detail, every fake email Mary had sent to the bank, every forged signature, every sneaky move she had made to steal my inheritance. It was all there in black and white. I did this for our family, Mary tried to argue, her voice weak. Patricia needed. Stop, my dad interrupted. His voice broke. Just stop, Mary. His hands tightened around the papers. His face was full of pain as he looked up at me. I hadn't seen that look on my dad's face since my mom died. Madison, I had no idea, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Of course you didn't, I said softly. Mary made sure of that. Mr. Ryan had put everything in order. Years of proof showing how Mary had tried to turn my dad against me while secretly trying to take my trust fund. The latest documents showed her failed attempt to transfer the money and the angry phone calls she made to the bank afterward. This is ridiculous, Patricia shouted, jumping up, her face red. Mom was just trying to make things fair. Gab has always had everything handed to her. I turned to my stepsister, feeling both sorry for her and frustrated. Handed to me? I repeated. I worked through college, built my career from nothing, and never touched that trust fund. Mom left it to me because she wanted me to have choices just like she had. But Mary couldn't stand that, could she? Mary's mask finally slipped. Her face twisted in anger. You ungrateful little. I cut her off before she could finish. I've already filed charges, I said firmly. The bank has all the evidence of attempted fraud. Mr. Ryan is handling everything. I turned to my dad, meeting his eyes. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said, but you needed to know the truth. The weight of 13 years of lies and manipulation filled the room. My dad looked at Mary like he was seeing her for the first time, and he didn't like what he saw. Then everything changed. My dad stood up, his hands shaking as he gripped the papers. Mary, he said, his voice filled with quiet anger. I want you out of this house. Tonight. What? Mary's voice shot up in panic. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for this family? Done for this family, my dad repeated, his tone sharp. You tried to steal from my daughter. You forged my signature. You've been lying to me for years. Patricia started crying. But for the first time, they weren't her usual fake tears. She looked truly shocked, like she was just realizing how serious this was. The police will want to speak with you, I told Mary. Mr. Ryan has already filed the reports. The bank's fraud department is involved now. Mary's eyes burned with fury. You planned this, she hissed. You knew I would try to take the trust fund. No, Mary, I said calmly. You planned this. I just made sure I was ready for when you did. I turned back to my dad. There's more, I said. Mr. Ryan found proof that she's been taking money from your account too. Small amounts over the years, but they've added up. My dad's face went pale. He sank into his chair, looking completely devastated. I felt a small pang of guilt for hurting my dad, but he needed to know the truth. Get out, he repeated to Mary. Both of you. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. Mary and Patricia rushed to pack their things, throwing blame and tears in every direction. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood quietly by the window, the same window where I used to wait for my mom to come home from work. I could almost hear her voice in my head. Always be prepared, sweetheart. And never let anyone take what's rightfully yours. In the weeks that followed, my dad and I had long overdue conversations. One evening, we sat in the kitchen, the same place where my mom used to help me with my homework. For the first time in years, we really talked. I failed you, my dad said, staring into his coffee cup. After your mom died, I was so afraid of being alone that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. We both made mistakes, I admitted. I could have told you sooner about Mary, but I wanted proof first. I needed you to see it for yourself. The legal process moved quickly. Mary faced charges for attempted fraud and financial theft. She tried to play the victim, claiming she only wanted to make things fair between me and Patricia. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bank had records of all the times she tried to access my trust fund over the years. A few weeks later, Patricia sent me an email. She said she had no idea what her mother had been planning. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I knew she was struggling to come to terms with the truth. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I always thought you had everything handed to you. Mom made it seem like you were the lucky one. But now I see she was just jealous of what your mom built for you." It wasn't an apology that could fix everything, but it was a start. With Mr. Ryan's help, I finally took a step toward my own dream. I started my own business consulting firm, something I had always wanted to do but had been too cautious to pursue. The trust funds my mom left me became the seed money for my new venture, just as she had intended. "Your mother would be proud," Mr. Ryan told me during one of our meetings. "She always said you had her business sense and your father's heart. She knew you'd do great things when you were ready." My dad started visiting me for lunch every week. Sometimes we talked about Mom, sharing memories that Mary had made too uncomfortable to discuss for years. Other times, we talked about the future. He was finally starting to look like himself again, the dad I remembered before Mom got sick. "You know what your mom used to say about you?" he asked one day. "She said you were like a diamond. Pressure only made you stronger." Life started to fall into place. My consulting firm grew fast, attracting clients who liked my honest advice and industry knowledge. I hired a small team, including Elizabeth, a talented analyst who reminded me of my mom, same drive, same determination to prove herself. Mary's trial ended with a plea deal. She avoided jail but had to pay back a large amount of money and was banned from working in any financial role. The last I heard, she had moved to Oklahoma to live with her sister. Patricia stayed in Los Angeles, working as a teacher's assistant. We didn't talk much, just the occasional email. Meanwhile, my dad focused on rebuilding our relationship. He started sharing stories about Mom that he had kept buried for years, how they met at a business conference, how they struggled to start her company, the late nights planning their future. Each story helped heal a little piece of what we had lost. One evening, as we sorted through old photos in the attic, we found Mom's business journal. Inside, there was a letter addressed to me, written just weeks before she passed. "My dearest Madison, I'm leaving you more than money. I'm leaving you the freedom to choose your own path. Don't let anyone dim your light or tell you what you deserve. You are stronger than you know, smarter than they give you credit for, and capable of anything you set your mind to. Trust yourself. I do. Love, Mom." Those words became my daily motivation. I framed the letter and hung it in my office as a reminder of where I came from and where I was going. My dad retired and started volunteering at a grief counseling center, helping other families navigate loss without losing themselves. Sometimes he even helped out at my firm, bringing years of experience and a fresh perspective that balanced my approach perfectly. Looking back, I realized everything had led me to this moment. 6 years later, I am amazed at how much has changed. My consulting firm has grown to 4 cities, helping pharmaceutical companies improve their operations, just like Mom used to do. The trust fund she left me didn't just secure my future, it became the foundation for helping others build theirs. Dad retired completely last year, but he still visits my office to mentor younger employees. He says it helps him stay connected to Mom's legacy. Every Sunday, we have lunch together, making up for all the years we lost because of Mary's lies. The biggest lesson I learned wasn't about money or betrayal, it was about standing up for myself. Mom knew that one day I would have to fight for what was mine, so she made sure I had the tools to do it. She taught me that real strength isn't just about being tough. It's about being prepared and knowing when to act. Sometimes I visit the house where I grew up. Dad still lives there, but it feels different now. The walls have been repainted, the furniture rearranged, and every trace of Mary is gone. Last week, in Mom's old office, which Dad turned into a library, I found her collection of business books. Inside one, she had written notes about teaching me to run the company someday. I never got the chance to learn from her, but I am building something of my own now. Every choice I make in my business carries her wisdom. The trust fund she left me wasn't just money. It was her belief in me. It gave me the strength to stand my ground when someone tried to take what was mine. Mary's attempt to steal my inheritance taught me an important lesson. Sometimes, people show you exactly who they are, and the best thing you can do is be ready. Now, I am grateful for those hard years because they shaped me into someone my mom would be proud of, someone who doesn't just survive challenges but grows stronger from them. Dad and I have reorganized the family photo albums, keeping only the memories that truly matter. On my desk at work, I keep my favorite picture, Mom and me in her office, both laughing about something I can't even remember. That photo reminds me every day that while some people try to tear you down, others lift you up in ways that last a lifetime. On the anniversary of my mother's passing, my dad and I visited her grave together. We brought fresh flowers from her favorite garden, a tradition we started that first year. As we stood there, I shared with him the letter I had found in her journal. He read it silently, his hands shaking slightly as he held the worn paper. "She was always thinking ahead," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "Even when she was fighting for her own life, she was fighting for yours too." In that moment I knew she had never really left me. I realized that every step I had taken to protect what my mom built, every time I stood my ground, and every choice I made to create something meaningful, that was her final gift to me. "She would be so proud of you," Dad said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "And I couldn't be prouder to call you my daughter." We stood there in silence, remembering her. Some wounds never fully heal, but love and resilience can turn even the deepest pain into strength.